Greetings and good evening. My name is Meredith Turner, and it is my honor to serve as moderator for tonight's program. And I'd like to just start by acknowledging that the Cleveland Public Library understands and recognizes the impact voting can have on our communities. And at the People's University, they are working hard to educate, engage, and shift minds and empower our community on topics that matter, such as voting. This September, they are committed to educating the community on why it matters to vote. They are supporting, sponsoring, and hosting a series of activities to educate our community on the importance of voting. So it is my honor tonight to serve as moderator for this wonderful conversation, Why Voting Matters. And at this time, I would like to introduce our panel. And so we have Leon A. Harris, who is the Assistant Director of Health and Human Services for Cuyahoga County. Are you there, Leon?
I am. Thank you, Meredith, for introducing me. Good evening, everyone. Looking forward to this conversation. Thank you.
All right. Welcome. Next, we have Kayla Griffin, Esquire. And Kayla is the State Director for All Voting is Local Greater Cleveland.
Hi, Kayla. Hi, Meredith. Thank you. I'm with All Voting is Local. We call it AVOL, State of Ohio, and I'm really excited to be here with you guys.
All right. And pulling in a strong anchor, we have our final panelist, then Richard Dick Peary, retired journalist for the Cleveland Plain Dealer and Call and Post.
Hello, and I'm glad to be here. I watched for the 40 years I was a journalist, the importance of voting and so many changes that took place as a result of the politics of the community.
All right. Thank you to our panelists. So I'd just like to acknowledge at this time Felton Thomas Jr., Executive Director and CEO of Cleveland Public Library, as well as Dr. Sadie Winlock, Chief of Equity in Education and Engagement, and our host for tonight's conversation, Twyla Turner, Director of Inclusion and Leadership, Equity, Education, and Engagement. So tonight, we are going to talk about why voting is important to us. At this time, I'd like you to take a few minutes. Each of you will have 5 minutes to just introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about your organizations, and why voting matters to you. And we'll start with you, Leon.
All right. Thank you. Again, good evening, everyone. My name is Leon Harris. I am the Assistant Director for the Department of Health and Human Services. I do think I should state that none of my views or opinions are the views and opinions of Cuyahoga County. They are my own. I am here because, I learned about voting at an early age. I would say in high school, where I actually lost the vice president of my class, my high school class, to a very good friend of mine. And I lost by a couple of votes. And so when that happened, I realized that voting is essential because, a couple of votes can swing it either way. And, I think as we, look at where we are in today's world, that we've seen the impact of voting. We've seen the impact of voting on the local level, and we've also seen it on a federal level. And so I think this is an important topic. I'm a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, where one of our national initiatives is Voteless People as a Hopeless People. And as an undergrad and even as an adult, I've knocked door to door to make sure that we have registered voters in Cuyahoga County and Summit County, where I went to undergrad at. So I think it's essential. I think it's important. And I think it's important for us to have this conversation so that we can debunk many of the myths that are often spread throughout our communities, not only here in Cleveland, but in other cities across the country. So thank you.
Thank you, my alpha brother. Ice cold. All right, Ms. Griffin.
Yeah, so I have the privilege of serving not only as the state director for All Voting is Local Ohio, but also as the first vice president for the Cleveland branch of the NAACP. In both organizations, we have voting as a central component of the work that we do. I'm also a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and as we all know, social justice is in our blood. This issue is something that is near and dear to us, and it should be near and dear to all of us because of the attack that we are seeing on the institution of elections and the right to vote. I like to say that voting is the front door of the mansion of democracy. It is really the place where we get to first engage with our political system. And we have throughout 2020 and 2021, we have seen what attacks on the electoral system look like. It is baffling to know that in the midst of a global pandemic here in Ohio, we had the largest amount of turnout for the 2020 election. But here in 2021, we are seeing laws being introduced in our state house that would take us backwards and hamper the right to vote. And so I think it's really important that we are centering these conversations because oftentimes people are not engaged because they, have their own struggles. They have things going on in their lives, and they think that voting is only a once every 4 years or once every 2 years, depending how politically engaged you are. But we really have to remind people that there's always an election. There's always something on the ballot that we need to be concerned about. And even right here in our own communities, in our back doors, in our backyards, there are issues that are being discussed. There are decisions and deals that are being brokered. And it is the representatives that are doing this, and we need to make sure that they are doing it on our behalf. So I'm really excited to engage in this conversation. What voting looks like and what elections and how they impact us, not only on the national level, but also on the local level as well.
All right. Thank you, Kayla. Mr. Perry.
I know the importance of voting. When I came to Cleveland, of course, the Black community was a small participant, relatively speaking, in the political life of the city, and the racial exclusions were everywhere. From City Hall, there are only certain jobs you could expect to get, and certainly in private industry, there were so many places where you knew you would never work or be employed or have much to do. I saw how the political activity affected these other things, and how as people got more involved in politics, how change took place. And above all, I just saw the landslide of rapid change that took place with the election of Carl Stokes as the first Black mayor of an American major city in 1967. And all of a sudden, opportunities that did not exist before for our people opened up, in not just in government, but all of a sudden, because of the demands that came from the Black community with the political power of the mayor, how private industry opened up so much and so quickly. Unfortunately, I've been around long enough to see that wane. And as voting has lessened in recent years, I have seen also how the services and the conditions of so many of our people are not what they should be and not what they might have been 40 years ago. And when I look at this, I always think about the real importance of voting is shown to us when we study our history, when we look at what happened in the South with the end of the Civil War, and suddenly the former slaves were able to vote, and they were revolutionizing the whole South and the social conditions there. And then when Reconstruction ended, And the old former slave owners wanted to take power back. They realized they could never win as long as the former slaves had the right to vote. And that's why we got the poll tax and we got the literacy tests, things that demanded resources that were always denied the slaves. And by ending the black vote in the South, they were able to take black control, and we had another 80 or 90 years of Jim Crow. I hope we don't go back to that, but what we see happening all over the country now is a new restrictions being placed on the way we vote, the ease with which we vote. To make it, new laws are being passed to make it harder for us to vote. And I hope that we wake up and realize that unless we mobilize again, we could lose it all. But that's why I'm so glad to participate in a forum like this.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. You bring so much to the table. I just have to say, I know that none of us were probably alive in 1967.
I was very much alive, I hate to say.
But we see how things repeat themselves. And every time we think we have come so far, we realize we still have to be in this fight. So I would be remiss. Let me apologize if I had given my whole introduction before I realized that I was on mute. One of the things that I wanted to share is that I work at the Cuyahoga County Board of Elections. That's my day job. So I spend all day making sure that democracy is transparent for the citizens in Cuyahoga County and making sure that they have access to the ballot. My background is education, so I've been a teacher. I met the Honorable late Congresswoman Stephanie Tubbs Jones in 1998. And I always knew that, voting was a value. It was a family value that I had. I used to go to the polls with my mother. I knew that we were a voting family. That's what we did. I can't really say that early on I knew why we were voting. I think that after I met her and I started to become engaged in the community, that's when I started to learn why voting was important. Whether it was federal elections or state elections or local elections. I started to learn about, taxes or, how we fund our universities or garbage pickup, right? The local level. So these are all things that impact our lives, and there's so many different issues. But let's talk about Cleveland for a second. This past election, and we are on our 6th election this year. We had 5 primaries, and now we're in our general election. And so even as I mentioned that, a lot of the difficulties that we had at the board was helping people to understand the difference between a primary election, for example, versus a general election. So as we talk about Cleveland, the turnout was 15 point something percent, just a little under 16% for the city. So why do you think that there's so much apathy among Clevelanders? You want to start with that, Kayla?
That's like the never-ending question that we're always trying to figure out when we're doing these on the ground mobilization, right? It's like, why can't we turn people out? And I think when you have these conversations with people, they are so burdened with everything else in their lives that they're like, well, why do I need to, show up to vote? Oftentimes they don't remember to show up to vote, or they're battling different things like, whether or not they're still in the polls to vote, and they show up and then they can. And so it's like, well, what is the point? Or is there people on the ballot or issues on the ballot that I care about? What we need to really help people to understand that all voting, it's in our name. All voting really is local. And so when you're talking about the local issues that people are dealing with, when you're talking about recycling and whether or not the people who are, making the contracts are following through with recycle pickup. When you're talking about social justice issues or the juvenile justice systems or the Just Us building down 1200 Ontario. Like, these are issues that we can directly control. And people don't understand that the issues that seem large and looming over them, whether or not they can pay their water bill, whether or not they are going to get fined if they go into court because they were driving through Bracknell and they happen to get picked up over there, stopped over there. These issues that seem to be large and looming in our worlds, we have direct impact on them if we show up to the ballot and we say who is going to be in those seats. We have a direct impact on who will sit at the judge's seat when we come into court. We have direct impact over how our water system is going to be impacted when we vote for our county officials, our city officials, and our mayors. And so we need to start really making people understand that every aspect of our lives are political. Everything that we touch, when we flip on the light switch, if you got First Energy, there's something going on there. Like, there's always something, there's always this exchange. And so our vote is really an exchange for our how we show up in a society. And when we help people to understand that, we give them the autonomy back so that they can have power over their everyday lives.
Thank you for that. And so, Brother Leon, I want you to, you heard the question, but I want you to frame your thoughts around money, power, and respect.
All right, that's a Locks album, so that's that's one of my favorite topics. But no, I think very similar to what Kayla laid out. So when we're talking about money, obviously money is the catalyst for all change, and it's the exchange for how we see lobbyists and super PACs come in and provide support to a lot of to candidates and to put them on a platform, or just to allow them to reach the masses. Where when we have these individuals who come from the community, and we're talking about Cleveland right now because there's a lot of individuals in Cleveland, as we have the mayoral race as well as the city council races actually happening right now. There are a lot of public, community individuals who are running for those seats. And, the networks that you have, the individuals that you have access to, I think it's a direct result of, lack of resources. When we think about, the things that we have been taught about voting as a Black community, and I know that's a question that we'll get to later, so I really don't want to get into it and be too premature. But, I think there are a lot of things that really impact exactly the way that we think. And, when I say we, I'm talking about our Black population, or our people think, about voting and how it impacts. And what Kayla said is important, because I think that we haven't seen the change. We haven't seen the change that we want to see. So it impacts our mindset and understanding how impactful or significant voting is. Because when we look at our housing situations, when we look at our employment situations, when we look at, access to finances and economic, resources, they're lacking in our communities. And so that's a direct, we see that reflected at the ballot box when it comes time to vote, because people are saying, we continuously hear that voting is important, but the times that I vote, my candidate doesn't win, or the things that are very dear or a priority to me, they don't happen. And so when those things don't happen, we fail to see turnout at the ballot. And I think, that's a, direct result of just the lack of resources. And in regard to power, I think power is important because influence is important, especially in our communities. If we have people who listen to us, we need to tell them the right things. We need to give them the accurate information. We have a lot of influential people, and with social media being as impactful as it is, you have people who are on social media, whether it's discussing the vaccine, whether it's discussing voting, and there's a lot of fraudulent and just misinformation that's being doled out to our people. And so it's really important to make sure that we're providing accurate information to those individuals who are yearning to learn more about voting and about other things that may impact democracy.
Thank you. And Mr. Peary, as we're exploring this idea of apathy, I noticed that one of our viewers, Kevin Widget II, mentioned, money being a catalyst for change. And I wanted your perspective on, like, I don't have the numbers, the stats, obviously, from turnout, for example, when Carl Stokes became mayor. I would imagine that coming out of the civil rights movements that, our turnout was much higher, participation was greater. We probably saw something like, turnouts when Barack Obama was on the ballot for the first time, But as we're talking about local politics and electing a mayor and what City Hall is going to look like and who's working at City Hall making those decisions, or who's the police chief going to be, or who garbage pickup I mentioned earlier, our public schools, all of this is local politics. Can you talk about the connection between, as we think about being a catalyst for change, what did the Stokes election do for the nation? And why aren't we, where did we go wrong?
Well, let me say, first of all, I do think we make a mistake. At least I don't like to use the word apathy, because I think when people don't vote and don't see a reason to vote, I think that's a message. They're saying, help. There's a reason behind why I don't believe in voting. And apathy doesn't quite get us to where we opened our eyes enough. I think what I get from so many people, they don't vote because they've seen, since the voting had picked up years ago or decades ago, in recent times, they've seen their lives getting worse without anybody coming along to help them with it. We're now in the age of robotics. We no longer live in the industrial age that was still here when Carl Stokes was elected, and it was important, if businesses wanted to make money, they had to hire more people, and we could get in on that hiring. Now, they found a way to make more money by not hiring people, by either shipping the work overseas or using robots and mechanics to do it. And we have to have a new politics that addresses these needs. I don't think we've gotten there yet. So I think that we have to look at this as a question of not why are they apathetic as much as what are we doing wrong? What are we failing to see? What are we failing to deal with in order to give the people hope that if they come out and participate, things would be better? But with that being said, yes, it was the total context of the times decades ago that got people to the polls, not just one person, although one person could lead it, but the whole civil rights spirit and the presence of hope among the people that if we work at this, things will be better, I think provided a tremendous motivation. And when Carl Stokes got elected, and up until then, I would imagine most people believe no Black person could be elected mayor of a major city. And all of a sudden, Carl did it. And the turnout, everybody in the country and even across the world was watching Cleveland, because this is the first place ever where it looked like we might get a Black mayor of a major city in America. And so when he got elected, the celebration, the jubilation was similar to what we saw when Barack Obama was elected in 2008. And I do think some of you were around in 2008, anyway, for that one. So if you could remember how happy everybody was across the country and how much they participated in the celebration, that's what you had in Cleveland on that night. And because of the election of Carl Stokes as mayor, all of a sudden he broke through the barrier that had held back, that seemed to be holding back Black political strength across the country. And you had an explosion of people everywhere running for mayor. And you had local politics being developed in a way they had never been developed before. And because you had so many local people getting into politics at the highest level, forming political organizations and all, people were used to politics and used to voting, and there was something on the ground. So when Barack Obama ran for president, he didn't have to reinvent the entire wheel, even though it had never been done before. There were people who were used to politics and were sophisticated in politics everywhere in the country. And that started with the Carl Stokes election in Cleveland. So you could say there was a very straight line from what we did here in 1967 to what the nation did in 2008. And without Cleveland's beginning, I don't know that we ever would have had a black president. So all of these things were wonderful. But at the same time, I want to emphasize that I think it is important for the people going into office today to not just look at what happened in the past and try to do what was done in the past, but look at the reality of today, the challenges that people face, certainly the people with a good education and who've been successful. They're living better than ever before, but there are so many others who have less opportunity than they had before. And unless we look at them and talk to them, and even more important, start listening to them, I don't know how we'll get out of this. It won't be just apathy. It'll be relevance that I think is the issue.
And so as we know that our lives, we are going to our jobs, going to school, paying bills, dealing with so many things. Sometimes, voting it's over here, right? But we also know that voting should be easy and it should be accessible, as accessible as possible. But in recent years, there have been over 400 anti-voting bills introduced in 48 states. And some of these bills, basically, they put up unnecessary barriers for people, in addition to everything else we're dealing with, whether it's, registering to vote or voting by mail or voting in person. What do we want our community to know about voter suppression, and what are some of the strategies that we can offer them tonight to help them empower themselves in this space? Kayla?
Yeah, thank you for that. Vote barriers to the ballots are so real. And here in Ohio, we have seen an onset of laws being introduced at the state level that will infringe on our rights to vote. One of the things that I do a lot is talk to people and try to explain to them. People look at Georgia and they look at Texas and they're like, oh, well, we're not Georgia, we're not Texas. And then I have to tell them, like, well, let me explain to you that our lawmakers back in 2006 already passed laws that said you cannot give water to somebody standing in the line. So while we're not introducing laws like that in 2021, like we've already had that. That's already a law in Ohio. We have, well, when they were talking about, well, in Texas, there's only one early vote site per county. Well, there's only one early vote site per county in Ohio. That's the state lawmakers who have said that. The state lawmakers say that you can only have one early vote site in Cleveland, in Franklin County, or in Noble County that only has 4,000 voters, but Cleveland has almost 900,000 registered voters. So there's inequity there. We are seeing here in 2021, House Bill 297 or 294, 294 was introduced by Bill Seitz, and they are right now trying to get this law to a place where we can digest it. But I really think that this is a Trojan horse of a bill. This is a bill that they are going to try to push through in order for them to push other things through and stack the cards against folks who look like me, who vote in urban areas, and make it extremely hard. What is interesting is there has been this attack, not just in Ohio, but all across the country on drop boxes, right? We've had drop boxes that we've utilized in Cuyahoga County for some time now. But in the pandemic, every county was able to utilize a drop box. Every county got a drop box. And we saw an uptick in early voting and vote by mail. In the past, most people were utilizing same day voting on election day. But this past election, we saw the numbers increase. So more than 50% of the people who voted in 2020, and like I said, it was almost 6 million people that voted in this election in Ohio. Over half of them utilized early voting and vote by mail. These are people who, for the first time, they were not going to the polls on election days, but they were voting in an alternative manner. And we had an amazing turnout. But what we are seeing in Columbus is lawmakers are saying, wait now, we don't want it to be easier for people to vote. We have one of the longest periods of early voting. The second bill that is introduced, and I'm pulling it up now so I make sure, it's House Bill 387. That would cut early voting period by more than half. Ohio already has one of the most aggressive early voting period because we understand that early voting or voting should be a season, because there are some people that may not be able to vote on election day. House Bill 297 and 294 is going to cut early voting on Monday. They're going to slash the use of drop boxes. So that means that folks who are out there registering people to vote, or if you were like me and your ballot came extremely late, then you're out there, I'm not going to stand in line, I'm just going to go and drop it off at the drop box. Those times would be cut. And so when you see Cuyahoga County and you see the line that was on early voting on Friday and Saturday, we would have partiers at the polls and post up across the street so that people can come and get something to eat, because the lines were so long, because people were waiting so long. That is what we're up against in Ohio. I get excited talking about this because I'm like, I need you guys to understand how important it is. Right now, there is an attack on every which angle, from the courts, our Supreme Court right now. If you guys aren't watching, there has been, there's cases that are going to the Supreme Court talking about voting, who is running for Secretary of State across our countries. You see people there's a guy in Texas who is now running for Secretary of State. He was at the January 6th insurrection, and he said that he was going down there to support former President Trump. And he was a part of the failed insurrection, now wanting to be in office as a Secretary of State over Texas. These are things that matter. They want to make sure that voting is as strenuous as possible. And what it also does, unfortunately, because oftentimes we get in these conversations that it might be a Republican or a Democrat issue, but what we know, even in Ohio, there's a report that was released by colleagues of ours, Secure Democracy. We know that rural folks, and I know we're in Cuyahoga County, so oftentimes we think we're the state of Cuyahoga County, but even in rural Ohio, the people who utilize early voting, the folks who utilize vote by mail increased in this election. And so when you undercut those necessary provisions for people who are disabled, people who are older and maybe can't get to their polling locations, you not just undercut the state of Cuyahoga County, but you're also undercutting folks who are outside on the outskirts, folks who are in rural and suburban areas who may not have the access. We have a really bad issue of public transportation all throughout our state. We have a really bad issue when it comes to the digital divide throughout our state. And so when we rely on alternative methods of voting, it really makes sure that the election system is inclusive of everyone who wants to have the opportunity to vote. And so we really have to be on the lookout. We really need to push back. there is still a fight going on with fair districts. And so we need to make sure that we are choosing our representatives and our representatives are not choosing us. And we can do that by showing up to the ballots.
And Mr. Perry, I saw you nodding your head earlier. If you had some thoughts.
Oh, well, I didn't know I was nodding my head. I certainly agree with everything that's been said. And I certainly think that not only is this important because of where we are today, but what is coming toward us is far more serious than anything we have experienced in the last 100 and some years, 150 years. What we are facing now with the insurrection, the violation of the national, even world capital of democracy, the Capitol building, we're facing now activists who want to not only shut down voting, but they want to shut down democracy. And unless we are involved fully, and unless we are engaged with public officials, we will not be able to mobilize and control the reaction to them and how to stop them. And I think it's what we face in the future is more serious than anything we face in the past in my lifetime. So I think that when people say they don't believe in voting or it doesn't make any difference, they're going to one day say, I'm sorry I wasn't involved in politics because this was coming toward us. And without any political strength, there was no way it could be stopped. So I just hope that people get the message.
And Brother Leon, if you could follow up and just also, what do we, in terms of the voters, what are their rights? How, what kind of strategies can we offer them in this space? The insurrection was surreal. It was very scary. You know, in the 60s, water hoses, dogs, racial intimidations, Ku Klux Klan. I mean, we're seeing that in 2.1. What kind of strategies, what kind of tools do we want to offer our brothers and sisters today as we continue to work through these, voter suppression tactics that probably will never stop? It will probably never stop. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think Dick and Kayla actually mentioned a lot, and they said a lot. But I think one of the main things is education. And what I try to explain to my friends or people who believe that voting is insignificant is that if it was that insignificant, they wouldn't be taking all of these measures to stop us from voting. And I think that's a way to simplify it. So really trying to simplify it for individuals and letting them know that, look, voting is important and look at how important it is. Education, the digital divide, all of those things are important. I think Kayla mentioned something when we talk about, because again, we just look at, inner city Cleveland, low income areas, but rural areas are really important. And if we think about, the older population, what we know is that in the next, 9 or 10 years or so, Americans who are 65 and older will be the majority of those individuals who are in this country. So when we talk about providing access to individuals who may not have transportation, who may not understand how to use the internet, who may not understand how to navigate these specific sites or just specific, tools to vote, we need to make sure that we're providing the access and we're also providing the technical assistance to do that. I think that as we take a look back in the history, what we see as well, when we think about the Voting Rights Act that was passed, when we think about, the Civil Rights Act that was passed, those things were passed because, the majority found another way. Once we got the right to vote and once those civil rights acts were passed, there was another way found to disenfranchise people, right? And that became the prison system. We saw, mass incarceration start to happen, and we saw the prison system explode from being, 300,000, people incarcerated in the 70s to about 2010, we were, over 1.5, nearly 2 million. So that's a 70%, or 700%. I think it's 700% explosion when we think about, what that looks like. So, and then we look at the bills and the people who we're voting for. We need to make sure that we have representatives at the table who are going to represent us at the local level and fight and advocate for the things that are important for us, and also people who are going to represent us at the state and federal levels, because there are bills that are being discussed and talked about right now. I think it's House Bill 322 and House Bill 327 that is looking to ban critical race theory. And if we think about, no one's teaching critical race theory, but it's been framed that way. And I think that's intentionally to discourage teachers, instructors, and professors, and any other government institutions, and anyone that may receive some type of public funding to teach history different than what the majority feels comfortable with it being taught. And if that happens, then our children and our future don't learn about things like disenfranchisement. They don't learn about things like the caste system that was created after slavery and after these civil rights acts were passed. So it's very important to just educate ourselves and really have an open mind, because a lot of times when we're speaking to people, we understand that people can be really rigid in their thoughts, and always try to make sure that I'm having an open mind and I'm at least considering what someone may say, and not being so rigid that I say I'll never do this. And a lot of times that's the case. So just being open with your thoughts, open with your minds, and really paying attention to what's going on publicly. The last thing I'll say is, as Kayla talked about things that are going on at the State House, just this week, there was an article talking about the gerrymandering that was happening at the state level, and how they're trying to redistrict, certain geographic boundaries throughout the state. And of course, they're trying to do that because of the elections that were lost. And, you do the gerrymandering, manipulate boundaries because you want it to be in your favor. And so again, simplifying that and helping, people hear the term gerrymandering and we don't know what that means. So it turns us off. But simplifying and saying, hey, look, we're manipulating boundaries, we're manipulating lines across neighborhoods, and, whether we want to call it housing projects or whatever. And you just simplify it for people to say, look, this is what's happening because I want things to work in my favor. I'm going to say that you are not a part of this neighborhood anymore, and I'm going to move you over here this way. Now I have the votes that I need to get the laws and legislation passed that I want. So, it's so much that's going on, and I'm sorry. I see Twyla checking in on time, so I don't want to keep going. But it's a lot going on, and I think there's a lot of great knowledge and ideas that have been shared by my other panelists.
Well, I know we could go on and on with this conversation, and we have a few more minutes. One of the things that I wanted to offer in terms of empowering people, at the Board of Elections, I work in the ballot and tabulation department. So we are responsible for everything. We create the ballot, the language on the ballot. We make sure all the candidates are there, the barcodes, everything is right with the ballots. We're responsible for all the vote by mail ballot applications, and any issues that may arise with those applications, as well as ballots. And so what I see often, in addition to criminalization of the ballot, felony disenfranchisement that you mentioned, voter purges, Kayla mentioned that, redistricting and gerrymandering, manipulating the lines. We often see these voter ID laws, and disproportionately, probably one in 16 Black people are affected by these purges and these efforts. And so what I can offer is that if you are planning to utilize the tool of voting by mail, make sure that you are completing that application properly. All the mandatory information is highlighted in yellow. Have somebody proofread your application, your spouse, a family member, or somebody. because we reject applications based on very simple, minor things, but it's the law. If you don't put your address on the application, we can reject you for not having an address there. Oftentimes they're pre-printed from the Board of Elections, so your information may already be in that space up there. But if you are printing one out for yourself, or you picked one up from, a local business or something, make sure that you put your full name, make sure you put your full address on the application. Another issue is your birthday. Oftentimes people will put their birthday, so they'll put September 22nd, 2021 instead of the actual year that they were born. And in parentheses, right next to where you put your birthday, it says, do not write today's date. But sometimes they'll overlook that and they will actually put the date that they are completing the application, or they will put their birth month and birthday, but they will put the current year. So we have to reject that application. Sometimes they won't put a birthday at all. So make sure you're putting that very important mandatory information in that vote by mail application. As far as the identification, you can use your driver's license. You can use a copy. It has to be a photocopy of your state ID. You would have to attach it to the application. When I complete a vote by mail application, I always just put the last 4 digits of my social security number. So we often have problems with that as well. Sometimes people will transpose the numbers, or they won't put any identification at all. You can also use a utility bill or a gun license. There are alternatives to having an ID when you're using a vote by mail application. And more importantly, make sure you sign it. We are going by the signature that you have on your voter registration card. So for some people, that might have been 20, 30 years ago. And we know that you're aging and your signature may change, or you may have some health issues. And so we are looking at that information. And because I work there, I'm definitely not looking to disenfranchise anybody. Because of COVID last year, we're fortunate that we are able to take all of this information over the phone. We can correct it. So if we call you, it's not a scam. We're not trying to get your information. We are really trying to expedite the process. We will send you a letter and we will let you know why we're rejecting that application. But we will also call you if you provide a phone number, and no, we're not selling your information to anybody. They're not going to call you and try to get you to buy stuff. So it's us calling. It's probably me personally, Meredith. Hey, it's your girl. You can trust me. But make sure you put a signature or get as close to that signature as you can. On your ID card, registration card, you may have signed your full first name and last name. What I'm starting to see an uptick in is just people initialing it. So we have to reject that application. So those are some very simple things that you can do if you're submitting a vote by mail application to help us get you your ballot in an expedited fashion. If you request the ballot by mail and you decide that you want to then go in person to vote, that is fine. Just make sure you do it in the early voting period. You can vote for 30 days prior to the election. We always vote that last weekend. We have Saturday and Sunday hours, and we always stop voting on that Monday before the election day. So for the general election, that'll be November 1st, Monday, November 1st, up until 2:00, that you can come down to the Board of Elections and cast your ballot. If you request the ballot by mail, however, and you decide to show up on election day, not my rules, I didn't make them, Ohio General Assembly. But if you show up on election day having requested a ballot by mail, they will make you vote provisionally. And we have received more than 1 or 2 records requests from Kayla and her organization to make sure that we are doing things properly. So that's just some stuff that I think might be helpful to you from my perspective working at the Board of Elections. And at this time, I'm just going to give each of our panelists an opportunity to make some closing remarks, 2 minutes each, and we're going to start with Brother Harris.
All right. Thank you so much. I knew you would start with me. No, so I just, I always want to take the time to show my appreciation. Often as leaders, we feel that we need to know everything about everything, and that's not the case. And I think there's a wealth of knowledge on this panel. And I think there's a wealth of knowledge in our community that we can learn and highlight the issues and some of the struggles that are being experienced, by various populations within our community. Oftentimes we overlook those individuals who might be elderly. We overlook those individuals who are younger. And we make them feel like they don't have a voice. I know, Meredith talked about the signature and why things are being rejected. And, we need to highlight some of the changes that are happening, across certain systems. When we think about our education system, for example, I'm not sure about Kayla, but, I know when I was in school, we learned cursive, so when you're asking for a signature now, a lot of these new voters don't know cursive and know how to write a signature, right? So that may be why we're seeing an initial, because they're like, okay, this is my signature. So understanding that there's evolution and change that is happening all around us in the different systems, understanding that it's just not one person who makes a change, and that we need to be really collaborative, and we need to build our people up and educate people. I think, a place that I've been in, education can divide our community oftentimes, because when you're educated, people feel that you're coming back and you feel that you're better than someone. And I don't think that's the case. I think that we all bring something to the table, and we need to approach things with an open mind, and not have that that bias against I guess implicit bias can go that way too. Not have that bias against someone just because of their title or position or educational status, and just learn from one another and just help us grow as a people and as a community. And I think if we do that, we'll be better off. But as Mr. Perry said, it is there's a lot on the horizon, and if we don't take the necessary steps, we can definitely be looking at something that's catastrophic for our community. So I want to say thank you again for being invited to this discussion. I want to thank my panelists for all the wonderful remarks and comments. And, I want to thank the people out there for chiming in and taking the opportunity to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Kayla?
Yeah, so first let me start by giving my thank yous. Thank you, Meredith. This was an amazing conversation. And to the panelists, Mr. Dick Perry, you are always a pleasure to listen to and just kind of soak up your knowledge. So as the elder of the group, I say thank you to you. For those of you who are looking to get involved, there was a study that just recently came out that said that people really trust their local poll workers. And it's often because they are their neighbors, and they are, they're the people that they go to church with, and they're the folks that they sit in PTA with. And so we know in 2020, or at least I've been told that in 2020, Cuyahoga County had the 70% of their poll workers were new first-time poll workers. So that makes for an amazing group of people who are learning the system and get a hands-on approach to how the election works. So sign up to be a poll worker. You get paid. It is a job. So you get to work that opportunity, and you get to learn how elections work and run, and then you can be able to share that knowledge with those in your community and circle as well. Please, please, please engage in the political system. Right now, on the federal level in Congress, we have a voting rights bill that is called the Freedom to Vote Act. Call your Congress people and tell them to support the Freedom to Vote Act. We are stalling out right now when it comes to the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. Call your senator and tell your senators to support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. It was referenced, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and these things that we have relied on for decades have been gutted by the Supreme Court, and so we have to put things in place here in the 21st century to make sure that we still have the right to vote. So we are supporting the Freedom to Vote Act. We are supporting the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. We are volunteering in our community. We are helping people register to vote. We are taking jobs as poll workers. And we are really showing up to the ballots to make sure that our communities are heard and acknowledged in these next elections. In 2022, well, before we even jump, we have a mayoral race. Like right now, we are in the thick of it. We have council persons who are up for election in the thick of it. Next year, we will have a governor's race. We will have the Secretary of State's race on the ballot. And so make sure you check your voter registration. And if it is up to date, if you have moved, if you have gotten married and changed your name, please, please, please update your voter registration so that you can have your vote counted as well. You can follow me at Kayla S. Griffin and follow our organization at Voting is Local. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Elder Perry.
Oh, wait a minute. Am I on? I'm sorry, I had my mute up. I am sorry that I cannot improve on what's been said. And I think it's an honor just to be on a panel with such knowledgeable people, young people, because when I see young people who are actually serious and trying to get things done and have the knowledge to know how to do it, I feel very good about it. So I want to thank you all for letting me be here with you. And I also want to warn what I was trying to say before, that even though the history has been rich and has had many successes, what's coming toward us is unlike anything we've ever known, and we need to be on our toes. We need to be more committed than ever before. The easy period that I grew up in with things getting better all the time, that's gone. And so I really hope that we understand that while voting alone is not the answer to everything, there is no answer without it. And so we all have to do that, and then we can debate about all the other things we have to do as well. Otherwise, we'll have no voice to create a defense for our young people coming up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Perry. Thank you, Kayla. Thank you, Leon, for you sharing your thoughts and your passion. Transformational communities are a result of civic engagement, and you all are a great model of what civic engagement could look like. And we can all find our own lanes. You can run for office. You can support a candidate. You can advocate on a specific issue, or you can take up policy issues like Kayla said. Call your congresspeople, call your senators, and ask them to support that very important legislation that she mentioned for the People Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. I want to invite you to join us in some civic participation. Next Tuesday is National Voter Registration Day, and the People's University. I love that. Branding. The People's University, Cleveland Public Library, is hosting a day of service at their branches all over the city of Cleveland. So I put the link in the chat. If you are interested in coming out and adopting a branch, you can volunteer from 10:30 to 12:30, or 12:30 to 2 p.m., or 2:30 to 4:30, or 4:30 to 6. That's the one that I'm going to volunteer for. And I'm volunteering at the Harvey Rice branch because it's right up the street from the Delta Center. I failed to mention I'm a proud member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And we are also hosting our own voter registration event this Saturday, September 25th, from 1 to 3 o'clock. We'll be at Faith Community United Credit Union. registering people to vote, playing civic engagement games. Care Alliance will be there. You can get screened for HIV or a COVID test or even a vaccination. And the best part about Saturday is that we have free Mitchell's ice cream. So come out and get some ice cream. I want to thank the Cleveland Public Library for this amazing opportunity to talk about why voting matters to us, why it matters to Cleveland, and why it matters to communities of color. Again, we could be here all night talking about this issue, and I hope that we can engage you as an audience in the future in this topic. But thank you so much for showing up tonight. If you don't remember anything else, remember, we the people. We are the ones who matter. We have the power, and we have to exercise that power. So you matter. And your vote matters. They wouldn't be working so hard to take it away from you if it didn't. So love you. That's all I got. Peace out, y'all. Good night.
Yeah.
And vote.